Hello, today I'm going to be doing a review of the Fiio A3 portable headphone amplifier. And I do want to mention that this has no DAC built in. It's just a headphone amp. So here's the front of the box and the back of the box. And they do give you a code here so you can go on their website to check to make sure that it's authentic. And then you slide this out of the box. The amp will be in this plastic bag sitting right in here. And on top of that would be a folder. Inside of that folder they give you two silicone pads so you can attach the portable amp to your phone, and the other one could be for a portable DAC. They give you a user manual, which you can just go online and download that if you want to read that. And a authentic checking warranty card. And then on the side there they give you this cardboard box, and inside of there they give you two rubber bands. So you can use that to attach the portable amp to your phone. And then they also give you a 3.5 to 3.5 connector. So you can use this to connect to your phone, to the headphone amplifier. And then they give you a USB to micro USB charging cable. It's about 2 or 3 feet long, so not very long. This end would plug into your computer, for example, and then this end plugs into the amp, as you can see. So let's go ahead and show you what the portable amp looks like. So here's the top of it, and here's the bottom, and then here's the front, and then there's the back. Now let's start with build quality first. This is a Fiio E11K. It's made of metal, but the metal on the Fiio A3, it's heavier and it feels more solid than the Fiio E11K. And it also feels better compared to the Q1 Mark II because they just put a thin sheet of metal around it. So in terms of solid metal construction, I think the Fiio A3 has the best feel out of the three, but it's probably the heaviest out of the three. So let's go ahead and move on to the back. You get a 3.5 headphone jack here, and it's on the back and not the front. And then you get a blue LED, as you can see. So it's quite tiny and it's not bright. Now when the battery gets low, about 1 or 2 hours left, it starts to blink blue. And then when you plug in the micro USB here in the middle, it'll start to pulsate blue, and when it's fully charged it'll stop pulsating and it'll be a solid blue. Now the battery life on this is about 15 hours if you're playing music, and if you're not playing anything from it, it lasts about 20 hours. And then the charge time is about 4 hours. And then you get your 3.5 line-in connection. So this is where you play your music from. And that's the next thing I'm going to explain here, is that this USB connection here in the middle, the micro USB, that's for charging only. So you cannot play music from that port. So the only input is this 3.5. So you connect your phone or your computer into this 3.5 here on the right. Now the good news is this amp does allow you to play music from the 3.5 if you also plug your computer into the USB to charge it. So you can charge it from the USB and play music in the 3.5 at the same time. But the problem with that is when you have both connections plugged in, is that there's a audible hiss on this amp at normal listening volume. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the power requirements for this amp. So for Sennheiser 58X Jubilees or my price M1060Cs, on high gain you only need about 2.5 in volume, and then on low gain you need about up to 4 in volume out of 9. And then T50 RP Mark IIIs, on high gain you need about 3.5 to 4 if I remember correctly. And then on low gain about 5.5 to 6 in volume. So it does have enough power for those T50 RP Mark III headphones. The problem is is that on high gain, you can start to hear a hiss at anything above 3 in volume if you're charging it and playing music at the same time. Now to remove that hiss, you just unplug the charging cable. So the good news is that you can charge it while playing music. The bad news is that there's a hiss. So that is not something I like about this amp. Now since I did notice that, the Fiio A5 has the same problem. And then the Fiio Q1 Mark II also has the same problem. So let's say if you plug, now the good news is this can actually play audio from the USB while charging and there's no hiss. But let's say if you're playing music from the computer with the USB, but let's say you plug a iPod into the 3.5. There is a hiss and a buzz, but it's only noticeable at about 90% volume or higher. So it is there, but you'll never hear it when you're listening to your headphones. But on the Fiio A3 on high gain, anything above like 3 in volume, it's pretty loud. And then on low gain, you can go up to about 5 in volume and not really hear it as much. So low gain, you don't hear the hiss problem as much. So let's go and start with the audio quality. Now there's almost no difference between low gain and high gain. The only downside with high gain is if you're charging it and playing music at the same time, you will hear the hiss louder. Now another downside with a high gain is if you have any headphones that are really easy to drive, I've noticed that there's a channel imbalance on this amp. So anything that's like between like 1 and 2, I mean the audio doesn't really come in until about like 2 in volume. And you know, like those monoprice M1060Cs only need 2.5 on high gain. So if I'm on the M1060Cs, I prefer to leave it in low gain, because once I get up to about 4 in volume, the channel imbalance is not really there anymore. So I do want to mention that. But otherwise, there's not really much difference between low and high gain. So I did most of my testing against the Q1 Mark II. So let's talk about the bass on this unit. But before we start that, let's talk about sound signature. This is a more warm sounding amp, and the highs can sound more dark sounding as well. But it's still, the highs still sound really good. And then the vocals are a little recessed on this. Sound signature on this amp, the Fiio A3, this is a very neutral, plain sounding amp. So it's one of the more neutral sounding amps I have heard. So it doesn't really color the audio all that much. So let's start with the bass boost. Now with the bass boost off on both, now the Fiio Q1 Mark II has more sub bass, while the Fiio A3 with the bass boost off, it sounds like there's no sub bass because it's very flat sounding. So this is going to have more boom, more rumble, more of that subwoofer type bass and the low frequencies. So those super low frequencies, well, the A3 doesn't really do those super low frequencies all that much. Now the good news is those mid bass, the mid bass kick, it's very tight, clean, and punchy sounding. So this still has very punchy bass, it's just lacking sub bass. So it still has like that mid bass, and it's probably more punchy, clean, and tighter sounding compared to the Q1 Mark II, but it's lacking sub bass with the bass boost switch off. And if you turn the bass switch on, it adds a little bit of sub bass, but that mid bass, that punchy, tight, clean bass gets emphasized, and it actually sounds really good for headphones that already have enough sub bass, and you just want to increase like the mid bass region. Well, the Fiio Q1 Mark II, if you turn the bass boost on, any headphones that already have good sub bass, it might be a little too overpowered. Now, I want to use an analogy here. Now, if you have computer speakers, computer monitors, powered speakers, if you put a bass boost on those speakers, it'll basically boost all the bass regions like above 100 Hertz, for example. That's what this sounds like. It's like giving your computer speakers a bass boost. While the Fiio Q1 Mark II, on the other hand, sounds like instead of giving a bass boost to your speakers, it sounds more like you're adding a subwoofer to your powered speakers. So that's what the bass sounds like on the Q1 Mark II. So, which one do I like better? I think with the bass boost on, if you have any headphones that already have good sub bass, I would take the Fiio A3. But if you have any headphones that are pretty weak in the bass region, then I would take the Q1 Mark II. And then with the bass boost off, then I would definitely take the Fiio Q1 Mark II. And by the way, the bass boost, either off or on, will sound better if you use it, the Fiio Q1 Mark II in the balance operation. So let's go ahead and move on to vocals and highs. Now before we talk about that first, even though this doesn't have a DAC built in, the detail and the clarity is about as good as the Fiio Q1 Mark II. Now, the downside is that the vocals and the highs on the Fiio Q1 Mark II sound smoother and more natural sounding still. This one, well, it's not exactly more natural sounding because this one's just very neutral and plain sounding. But here's where the biggest problem with the Fiio A3 is that the Fiio Q1 Mark II has better tonality. The Fiio A3, it almost sounds a little too plain sounding, like it's a bit dull and plain sounding, because it's very neutral sounding. So for example, if I'm listening to a piano, right, the Fiio Q1 Mark II is going to add more character to that piano. While the Fiio A3, if I listen to 5 different pianos, they're not going to sound a whole lot different because it's lacking character. In other words, it's lacking tonality. Same thing with vocals on the Q1 Mark II. If I'm listening to a voice that's very deep sounding, it's going to add character to that vocal. While on this, you're going to still hear that it's deep sounding, it's just going to sound a little too plain sounding because it's lacking tonality. And since it's lacking tonality, I also noticed that since it's kind of plain sounding, it's also lacking a tiny bit of dynamics as well. So this still has a little bit better dynamics. But I want to mention that this amp still sounds really, really good. It's about 90% as good as maybe the Q1 Mark II in the unbalanced operation. It's just a very neutral sounding amp. Basically, the worst thing I didn't really like about this is the tonality. Now, the Fiio A3 compared to the Q1 Mark II in the balance operation, then I would definitely take the Fiio Q1 Mark II. Because once you go balanced on this, you get better instrument separation. You definitely notice that tonality difference even more, and the dynamics. And then the highs actually get a little less dark, and the bass regions actually get a little less warm as well when you go balanced in this. So the highs will sound better. The highs have better tonality, and overall when you go into balance mode, you also get a little bit better clarity and detail as well. So once you go into balanced on the Fiio Q1 Mark II, I definitely think it sounds much better than the Fiio A3. But in the unbalanced operation, I still like this amp better than the Fiio A3. So this goes for like 80 bucks, and then this one's like 65, and it doesn't even have a included DAC built in. Now I am going to be reviewing some other portable amps like the Fiio A5, which that amp is kind of neutral-ish, kind of like the A3, but it doesn't have that tonality problem really. It's definitely a much better amp, but I don't know if it's really worth twice the price. And I also have the Fiio K5, and personally, if you're looking for something cheaper than the Q1 Mark II, that Fiio K, did I say K5? I meant to say K1, might actually be a better recommendation over the Fiio A3. But overall, my conclusion is that I think the Fiio Q1 Mark II is the better buy of these two. So thank you for watching.